Mara Kronenfeld, welcome to the Let's Give a Damn podcast.
Hi, Nick. Thanks for having me here.
I am so despite all of the craziness happening around our conversation and around the world, I'm so glad to have you here. And thanks for doing it so last minute. But things are happening, by the minute, by the hour right now. And I've been wanting to have you on. And this just yesterday, I was thinking it has to be now. There's so much to talk about, and we need to get as much noise going about your work. And so thank you for making it happen so quickly. My first question is, how are you doing? Let's start, I guess it might not be a light answer, but let's start sort of talking about the weather, but how are you doing? Because you are in this work more than most people are, right? People are, your average Joe and Sally, they're scrolling and they feel like they're in it because they're seeing the stuff all the time. You're actually in a lot of the decision-making happening and a lot of the aid that's going in. And so you're in it every moment of every day. And so how are you on this fine-ish day?
Thanks, Nick. It's been 15 months of hell. And I say to our small staff at UNRWA USA, just really about 10 people, that our very brain chemistry has transformed in these 15 months. We are different people now than we were when this started. And I think we're all experiencing some element of, it's not even post-traumatic stress syndrome. I hope it's post. God, I hope it's post.
Me too.
But it's just ongoing pain, and what just stops you in your tracks every single day is whatever we are feeling, myself and my staff, you, anyone watching this horror play out on their screens. It is just nothing comparable to what those on the ground have experienced and are continuing to experience. Just 24 hours after the ceasefire, which I know we'll get into, I've just read there are 80 Palestinians in Gaza killed. So we are on the front, kind of have a front row view of what's going on, and that's our job. And so we are on our computer screens, on our phone screens all the time. And, but that's our duty. And our duty is to see what's going on and frankly, to feel that pain so that we can act and so that we can share with the world and be part of those who are helping people really understand what's been going on in Gaza. So we're doing okay. I'm most concerned for, as I said, those on the ground, and for my beloved staff members. 4 of them have family in Gaza, and one who many have seen in podcasts and news interviews, Hani al-Mahdoun, who's had 2 brothers killed in Gaza. The last one surely targeted and killed. And his brother Majid and his brother Mahmoud were some of the best people. And Chef Mahmoud was feeding thousands of people with his Gaza soup kitchen daily. And you've got to wonder if that's why he was killed, because he was keeping Palestinians in Gaza alive. So my heart is most of the day is with all those I know who have family there, all those I know and knew in Gaza who've suffered, if not paid the ultimate price for being born where they happen to be born.
Yeah. Do you find it, Mara, hard to, you have a family, right? You have kids, you have other things to do. You have a dog, you have soccer games or whatever to go to. Do you find it hard to separate these things, right? You're at the soccer game with your kid or whatever, you're walking the dog, and it's, those things are still sort of playing. Do you find that hard? And what have you done to sort of help mitigate that from happening?
Yeah, Nick. Oh, you went for the jugular. You could see it. I feel it. No, I'm just kidding. But yeah, that's it's my personal struggle because certainly my kids are old enough to know what's going on. They ask me questions. They ask my husband. I think but I also have an obligation as a mother to, they can't live the pain that I'm living. They're too young. And and so I share with them just enough, but I have to keep the emotion at bay. And as probably anybody who just watched me tear up or who's watched me, I cry easily. I am an emotional person, and it's very hard for me to put up those walls, but I absolutely have to at times. I find myself in somewhat of a multi personality disorder setting where I'm at the soccer game, I'm cheering on the team, and one half of me is out there being a member of my community
Mm.
in Maryland, and trying to take a moment away from the craziness. But it's always there, and I think always on my mind is I'm always I want people to know the truth. And I know that our media in the US doesn't always tell it. So it's always on my mind. How much do I talk about it? How much am I going to be able to talk about it, maintain my calm, but also help increase understanding in this world? And I'm also not preachy. It's just not my nature. So how do I do it in a way that will connect to people, that will make them stop and think? And sometimes I succeed, honestly, and sometimes I don't. And then I also have, frankly, the privilege to let it go for an evening and to hang with the mothers in my neighborhood and let it go. And I'm not necessarily that good at it, but I have the privilege to even attempt that, which so many others do not.
Yeah, I feel that so deeply as a father of three amazing children that I am trying to get. We're trying to raise them so that they'll care about these things, right? So that they'll be damn givers, and they already are. But it's how do you introduce them to the horrors of the world while not putting the burden on their tiny little bodies and brains. And they have no, I don't know how to handle it, as you just pointed out. We don't know how to do this as adults. They definitely don't. And so yeah, it's a really hard thing. um
100%. And I always think about growing up, our parents, at least, so many people I know, they said, you've got to read the newspaper every day. I mean, my parents were so informed and thoughtful and had traveled, and now I don't tell my kids to read the newspaper, because if they did, they would be filled with anxiety every single moment of their life. And
yeah
so, exactly, you hit the nail on the head. How do you tell them enough to keep them engaged and keep make sure that they are part of a generation who does give a damn, and at the same time not overwhelm them. So it's
yeah
a constant battle.
Mm, I feel that. We're going to spend the majority of our time momentarily talking about the work. But before that, one of my favorite parts of the conversations that I have is I always try to, before we introduce the work, right, the big thing, which most of my guests have, whether it's a book or a nonprofit or a big project or whatever, I want to get to know my guests a little more. You and I, we've had the honor, well, I've had the honor, I don't know if it's an honor
Honor
for you,
for me as
but
well.
I've had the honor of working alongside you all as a consultant for a few months at UNRWA USA, and it's been such an incredible joy to get to know you and the team. But we haven't. This will be our longest one-on-one conversation yet, and so I don't really know a ton about you beyond the tour that we did last autumn and the work that we're doing this year together. So take as little or as long as you'd like, but I would love to get to know the who, what, when, where, and why of Mara Kronenfeld. Where did you come from? How did you get here? Who are the people, places, and things that shaped you, that made you the person that you are today? Yeah, go into that for a minute. Just tell me a little bit about that, how you got here.
Sure, sure. I grew up in Southern California. It's often shocks people, particularly as I've gotten older, that I'm from SoCal. I'm probably a Valley girl. I probably have tried to remove like from my language over the course of many years. But because I've spent so much time traveling and living in the Middle East and North Africa, I've picked up, I don't even hear it, but I'm told I've picked up a certain amount of an accent because I'm always around, frankly, Arabic speakers or French speakers. And so I often get from Americans, literally from Americans, are you from Germany or Norway or something? Because I've picked up somehow a way of speaking that makes me sound like Middle European, which is just shocking. But I am a Valley girl through and through, and had a really uh, wonderful upbringing, actually from Riverside, a small town, an hour and a half east of LA. These days it's 3 hours east of LA because the traffic is
Right.
a nightmare. But a small town, as everyone knows, nothing glamorous, nothing fancy in any sort of way, and a really, really kind of gentle upbringing, away from the kind of glitz of LA. And my parents happened to be, they're academics, the professors, and my mom's a writer and a poet, and my dad's an anthropologist, and they just always believed in helping my talk about how we raise our kids, helping myself and my brother understand that there's a world outside the US, there's a world outside the bubble that we're in, and it's really an obligation we have to understand people who are different than us, or who are just not even different, who come from different places than us, and understand the history of other settings and the politics and all these things. So we always really firmly grew up with an understanding that we're just in one small part of the world. And so we always traveled. My father had done his field research in Ghana and West Africa. They had traveled around, and then we got to go to camp across Mexico when I was 6, and then got to go to Europe later on. And just again, they told us to read the newspaper. We read it. We learned a lot of things. And so when I got into college, I knew I was going to study international relations on some sort of level. And then I got I got just drawn into a class by a wonderful professor at Stanford, Joel Bainin, who's Jewish and highly critical of Israeli policy, and he's actually Israeli and moved to the U.S. And he opened my world to so much that I didn't know, frankly. And so the key moments in my life have been when I realized how little I know.
Wow.
So, and how much more I have to learn. And that was an epiphany at that time, one of the earliest ones, where I kind of thought I knew what the Middle East was about. And little did I know how much, even in my very liberal, open environment that I was born in, how much of the media representations had seeped into my own DNA, my own thoughts and conclusions about the world, how I took for granted a lot of mythology. I, who um, happened to be Jewish, was born into a lot of mythology about the Middle East and about Israel in particular. Um, so this professor rocked my international relations world, and I started taking as many courses as I could on the Middle East and North Africa. And then I got to travel to Egypt right out of college for a year. And then I had in the course of my professional and personal life, I've spent 2 years living in Syria, studying Arabic there, with a Fulbright program, and then lived in Morocco on and off. Happened to marry a Moroccan gentleman, so my kids are Moroccan American. And I think the other thing that was a huge influence on how I came to my own independent thinking around issues involving Israel and Palestine were twofold, maybe threefold. One was that my dad taught me to question authority
Mm.
consistently. So he just said, you never take for granted that somebody is morally correct or authorized to tell you what to do. And I always say he reaped the benefits of that, and then I questioned him constantly, and I was a little pain in the ass, I'm going to
You
tell
and me
you.
both. You and me both.
So we constantly discussed, fought, whatever, but he was game for it. God love him. He was game for it. And we discussed and discussed and discussed. And frankly, over time, we've influenced each other so much. It really has been two-way. And then he also, and this was like a mantra in my head, quoted this a couple of things. One, if a Talmudic scholar, if you're not for yourself, if you're for yourself only, who are you for? And if you're not for yourself, who's for you? And so this idea that we have to think about other people, that was just part of being Jewish for me. Was we didn't call him tikkun al olam, repair the world, but we, in my family, it was, how do we care for other people? How do we think about others, not just ourselves? And then, of course, this statement, they came from this, I think in World War II, they came for the one group and I wasn't part of that group, so I didn't care. They came for another group, I wasn't part of that group and I didn't care. They came for me and suddenly I was alone. And so that has been the mantra, the moral, one of the moral codes I grew up with, and this leads me here to this day. And finally, my mom um, gave me unconditional love, and that has come in handy in ways I would cry if I really thought deeply about it right now. But no matter what hurls, what horrible things people hurl at us at UNRWA USA, at me, I've had the most horrible things said to me, to my fellow staff. People call me self-hating Jew, whatever. I just, in the end, I know I'm loved, and I
Yeah.
know I'm loved for who I am. And then I forgot why I forgot. I should say the most important of all influences on me was my grandfather, who escaped Nazi Germany, and whose sister's family was killed in the Holocaust. And bless his soul, he came to the U.S. and he said never again. And for him, it meant anybody. And I could say, without kind of lionizing him, like he didn't have a prejudiced bone in his body, and
Mm.
was just a gregarious, wonderful person, as any of my friends from Riverside can attest to. And I really am here because of what he believed in.
That was a lot. Thank you for. I mean, it was only a couple minutes, but you packed so much in there. And for all the people listening, I just want to recount a couple things that stood out to me there that I want. There was some really impactful moments in there. One of the things is early on, you said that all the key moments in your life came when you were realizing how little you knew. That's that young people listening. If you are able to capture that at a young age, your life, it's not going to be easy, but it will be brilliantly better if you don't walk around like you already know everything. If you walk around ready to learn and ready to be transformed by college professors or grandparents or whatever the case. I also loved how you shared that to always question authority, never assume that just because someone has a title, whether it's a professor or dad or president or whatever, just because they have a title does not mean they know what the hell they're talking about or that they're right. That just those two are not the same. We should always question authority. My kids, I grew up in a household where I was never allowed to question authority, ever, 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 ever. And my kids are growing up in a household where they can, and it's frustrating sometimes
It's not
to
easy
have
as a
to,
parent.
to have my authority questioned. But boy, oh boy, am I glad that it's that way, where I have to deal with the fact that my kids aren't scared that they're going to get harmed
Yeah,
or whatever if they question my authority, right?
yeah,
And so I love that. And then the unconditional love of your mother. It is so good to know that you're loved
yeah,
and to walk through life that way because you
yeah,
get just a tremendous confidence from that. And lastly, the never again for anyone from your
yeah,
grandfather. I mean, I've learned these last 15 months have been why I've been thinking about. I was talking with my mentor the other day about the last, really the last 5 years. Well, the last 8 years, the whole first Trump presidency. But then at the end of the Trump presidency, we had George Floyd, Black Lives Matter, a movement that sparked just incredible change all around the world. And then we had COVID, and now this. Like, there have been some really traumatizing things that have happened, and I'm really grateful that there are whether we're talking about the genocide happening in Gaza or whether we're talking about systemic racism and what the kind of the conversations that came out of Black Lives Matter. Like, it's never again for anyone, right? It's not. We have to like collective liberation is the way. Like,
yeah,
everybody getting free is the way, right? And so your
yeah,
grandfather, someone who might have had more reason than others to say, I don't like those people or that thing or whatever, and I'm gonna be for everybody except them. He could have said that,
yeah,
and he said no, never again for anyone.
yeah,
And I'm so grateful for the Jewish community that I've seen rise up. I mean, just by the untold number over the
yeah,
past 15 months, saying no, 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 no. That what they're doing doesn't define me. What they're doing is not who I am. Zionism and Judaism, two totally different things.
yeah,
Like, my faith is so important, and my faith is actually what's informing me to say,
hundred
no,
percent.
no more. So really beautiful retelling of your upbringing. Let's get into the work because we have a lot to get to. The people that are listening to this show, they give a damn and they care deeply, and I've seen them. I've received just over the past 15 months, thousands of emails and DMs and messages of support, and also like, hey, what can I do? And them taking action. And so they're here, well, they're listening. They're really excited to learn from you and to hear more about really ultimately what this is. Not a passive community either. Like we don't just want to hear good, inspiring stories and then just move on. We want to take action. And so UNRWA USA. Let's begin with maybe a question that some people might, they're part of this community, but they don't quite know about UNRWA USA and what it means. And so do a quick 2 or 3 minute overview of not just UNRWA USA, but how does it tied to UNRWA, right?
Yeah.
UNRWA being a governmental organization, UNRWA USA being a nonprofit. Like, how does it tie? How do they play together? Yeah, give us that overview, and then we'll get into really these big, not just the ceasefire, but mainly the ban that is hopefully not going to happen, but we presume it's coming up.
Great. Yeah. Thank you, Nick, and thank you for the retelling, and also obviously we have a shared sensibility around kids. So wonderful, and thanks to all of your community for caring. So UNRWA, the United Nations Relief and Works Agency for Palestine Refugees, is obviously a United Nations agency. It was established in 1949 after the creation of Israel. It was really meant to be a temporary solution for those 750,000 plus Palestinians, and UNRWA calls them Palestine refugees, because it was really anybody who was refugeed, whether they're Christian, Jewish, or Muslim, as a result of the creation of the state of Israel. And though it was meant to be temporary to serve the food, health, housing, shelter needs of that population, up until they could return home. And it really, I always say that UNRWA was meant to reach there was built into UNRWA planned obsolescence, like some sort of electronic equipment that is made to eventually fail so that you buy the next one or you get to the next solution, essentially. So UNRWA was never meant to be around for 75 years. We all hope for the day when UNRWA is not needed. But UNRWA cannot go away with the unilateral, frankly, outrageous actions of one state. It has to be because there is a just and durable political solution addressing the plight of Palestine refugees, many of whom have not been able, and their descendants who have not been able to go home. And it cannot be, it is still absolutely necessary for UNRWA to be there because nobody else is addressing the basic needs of this population until that time. Now, UNRWA, the United Nations agency, is one thing. UNRWA USA is, as you mentioned, a separate independent NGO, 501c3, and we were established in 2006. Started as a Friends of UN organization like UNICEF USA, WFP, World Food Program USA, but it's a little wonky here, so bear with us, but essentially US finance regulations, rightly so, said if you're bringing in and raising revenue from American taxpayers, you cannot just be a pass-through that would send money to a foreign entity, albeit a UN agency. So you have to be independent so that you, as an American institution with a majority American board, have full discretion and control over the funds you use and make sure that they are used for a purpose that is in line with what the American donors are had in mind. So that's why we're independent. We're financially independent, legally independent, but that said, we work hand in hand with UNRWA. We have an MOU with them. We don't implement anything on the ground. Our role really is just awareness raising and fundraising, and we want to make sure that Americans understand the plight of Palestine refugees, the 75 years of displacement, conflict, the need for UNRWA. Again, we wish the need wasn't there, but it is there. And then, of course, the work that UNRWA does. So we do a lot of communications, a lot of awareness building around that through social media, through storytelling, interviewing refugees, and interviewing those who work at UNRWA, and interviewing those in the United States who know UNRWA's work well.
Incredible. And this is a pretty, I think this matters for the rest of our conversation and for those that are getting introduced. One of the things that I've heard Hanny and you bring up, many times is because people, rightfully so, don't trust most nonprofits, right? They look at these, they'll go to the website and they'll download the tax, returns from the other years, and they'll be like, oh my God, you spent, you spent 50% on staff and staff and overhead, and then only 50%, like 50% of my dollar, or even less with some organizations, it's even less that actually gets to the work. And UNRWA is his, a small fraction of that actually goes to overhead. Can you just share 20 seconds on that? Because I think that's important for people to know, as they're going to love what they hear, but can I also trust that this organization is using my money well?
Yes, yes. And I actually have to close my door once again. 1 second,
Go
hold that
for it.
thought. Be right
Go
back.
for it. Go for it.
I swear I was not stalling. We have a good answer for that question. Yeah. So frankly, our staff, like I said, has been around about 10 people, and we hit above, essentially hit above our weight. So we with this small group of 10 people, we were able to raise over $50 million in 2024. And that means that the overhead rate, we're estimating to be something around 4%, 4.5%. And so what that means in practice, Nick, is that every dollar that a supporter of ours contributes, 96 cents, 95.5 cents go to programs.
Incredible.
And the vast majority of those programs are, of course, directly to helping save lives at this critical moment in Gaza. And then the other programs that we run, which are a very small percentage of the work we do, but they're about this awareness building, about interviewing people, as I said, getting the word out, helping Americans understand the plight of Palestine refugees and the key work that UNRWA does. We are so proud of that overhead rate, because it shows you how efficient we are trying to be as an organization, and how much we want your dollar to go to work. So thank you for asking about that. It is not without hardship. It is hard, long hours, but it is. If we weren't getting the vast majority of funds to people in need, then what are we working for?
Yeah, much more than many other nonprofit goals that I've seen with other nonprofits, where the money actually goes. Like, every dollar that it isn't going to Gaza is literally, it could be between, a starving child, literally within like a week of you giving it, it could mean a starving child not like getting that closer to death, or whatever the case may be. And so it really is life saving, every dollar
100%.
life saving.
Yeah.
So $56 million in 2024. Another horrific thing that happened during that year was back in October, which is one of the reasons we're talking today. The Israeli Knesset essentially said, we are beginning the process of, and this is after a wild, earlier in the year, a wild misinformation campaign to demonize UNRWA and UNRWA's work and UNRWA's incredible employees working their asses off in Gaza. They're doing so much to help these people, and then they get demonized by Israel. So yeah, back in October, essentially, the world was told that we're going to begin the process, Israel said, to remove UNRWA from Gaza. Tell us about what has happened since then. And really, we are nearing, we don't know if it's going to happen. We don't know what's going to happen in a couple of weeks. But in theory, we're nearing that deadline, which it literally makes me sick to my stomach when I think about how important and vital the work is on a not just a daily, but an hourly and a minutely basis that UNRWA does. And in 2 weeks, that could all be gone. That is so wild to me. So please give us sort of the last 90 days.
Yeah. Yeah. So like you said, these laws were passed in early October, essentially two laws, which in practice are meant to ban UNRWA from working in the occupied Palestinian territory, which is Gaza, the West Bank, including East Jerusalem. So the laws, when they were passed, they have essentially a 90-day implementation period, and that 90 days gets us to where we are now. Basically, by the end of this month, whether it's January 28th, 29th, or 30th, or February 1st, that is supposed to be the 90 days, depending on who's counting. And frankly, none of this is very clear. Israel has given no further indication beyond the passing of these bills when they're and this theoretical 90-day period before they're implemented, in terms of how these will be implemented, exactly which date. Nothing has been put out there, and frankly, I worry that Israel, it's not within this extremist right-wing government's interest to clarify, because unfortunately we have seen that concern for humanitarian aid and how it gets there, and frankly at this point the lives of innocent civilians has not been first and foremost on their mind. So they have not been clear, and there may be a political motivation for not being clear. Whereas UNRWA and the UN more broadly, this including the Secretary General, have said we will make no mitigation plans for UNRWA not working, because the laws by Israel are in fact unilateral, outrageous actions by one state. And in fact, the occupying power, which has a duty under the Geneva Conventions to take care of the population it occupies, to be responsible for humanitarian aid of that population. So UNRWA and the UN have made no mitigation plans. In fact, what I want everyone listening to understand is that UNRWA is not there because a couple of men and women in suits said we need to be there and we're the best people. UNRWA is there because the community of nations, through the United Nations, said you are mandated to be there.
Mm.
And that mandate was renewed every couple of years for 75 years. And again, the only reason that mandate has continued to be renewed and UNRWA has stuck around well beyond its planned tenure was because there has been no political solution, because there is no state to take care of these refugees. So what has happened in this campaign against UNRWA, which these laws are one can say the culmination of this campaign, unless hopefully they don't actually go into effect, was really to get rid of UNRWA. Why? Because, I hate to say it, but because UNRWA keeps Palestinians alive.
Yep.
And if you get rid of UNRWA, yeah, more Palestinians die. What dies with them is what Israel would like, this government in Israel would like, is their political aspirations, a future sovereign state, the very idea of being Palestinian. And so, and unfortunately, those who are targeting UNRWA think that if you get rid of UNRWA, you get rid of many rights, perhaps, but the right of return in particular. And the right of return is in a different UN mandate. UNRWA does not guarantee the right of return. It just protects the refugees who are deserving of that right. But
Yes.
that right is part of international law, whether UNRWA is there or not. So it really, any allegation that Israel has made has to be understood within that larger context of, as you said, trying to demonize a UN agency
Right.
that is being created by the world community. Just over 100 countries got together this summer at the United Nations and said, 180, including the US as part of the UN Security Council, and said, we repeat that we support UNRWA's mandate and the important, essential work they're doing to save Palestinian lives at this crucial moment.
Yeah. So there's so much to touch on in there, but I'm trying to be wise about where we go from here. I know that, I want to be responsible with this conversation and really be helpful, like help people. Let's get to helping people take some steps forward in these last couple of weeks and really ongoing, because I trust and I hope that UNRWA will continue to be around and that it will be a choice. It'll be a choice at some point for UNRWA to dissolve because they don't need to anymore because Palestine is free, right? Like that's the hope, and not that they're pushed out. What happens for those wanting to support the incredible work that UNRWA USA is doing? I've been a part of a bunch of meetings that we've had over the last week with hundreds of folks from all over the country, sort of updating folks on what's happening and what are the numbers and what's at stake and what's not at stake and all that stuff. With what kind of confidence can people continue to give to UNRWA USA? Like, what happens, even if, let's say, in 2.5 weeks or whatever it is, 2 weeks now, UNRWA is essentially, I don't know how this happens, but they get kicked out, or the beginning of
Yep.
getting kicked out.
Yep.
What happens to UNRWA USA? What, and I know a lot of these are like questions that you all don't even know, but like, what kind of direction do we give people as they're like, yeah, please continue giving, because UNRWA USA, regardless of what happens with UNRWA, is going to continue the work in fill in the blank kind of ways.
Yep. Yep. So I want to say emphatically to everybody listening, we are still providing resources, funds to UNRWA for the humanitarian support. They are still deploying our resources through whatever trucks get in, but it's not just how many trucks get in, because unfortunately humanitarian aid is systematically being blocked, but it's also aid. We're giving funds that support doctors' salaries and nurses and health workers who are providing medical assistance as we speak. Right now, UNRWA, which was meant to be for primary care with clinics across the Gaza Strip, has now become the major provider of medical aid because hospitals have systematically been damaged and destroyed across Gaza, as we know. So aid to UNRWA USA, which we're in turn getting to UNRWA as fast as we can, is yes going for food, for non-food items, but it's also going for medical care, for counselors to provide trauma support to young children and their families, for UNRWA to be able to provide water. UNRWA is the organization that's essentially in charge of civic infrastructure. So they're providing the water and the sanitation treatment as possible in when so much of the strip has been decimated. So we will continue to give to UNRWA as long as we know they are still working there. And when we are absolutely certain, without a shadow of a doubt, that UNRWA cannot work in Gaza for the safety of their thousands and thousands of workers in Gaza, then we will. I assure everyone here, transparency is a key value for us. We will be telling all of our supporters that what's going on and how we plan to use the funds. Right now, in fact, on Monday, we're meeting for our next large disbursement, multi-million dollar disbursement to UNRWA, and we will continue to send funds up until January 24th. And then we're going to wait, like everybody else, to understand how this is going to work. So if you're willing to support, please send funds right away, and we will be deploying them right away. And we promise to tell our community everything we know as we near the end of this month in terms of UNRWA's operations. I also want to say, as much as every dollar in is going to help save lives, and so we do encourage folks to consider generously contributing. There are two other major actions you can take, which are absolutely necessary. And extremely meaningful. So one of them is to engage in advocacy for UNRWA USA and for UNRWA around Stop the Ban. So if you go to our website, unrwausa.org/stop the ban, you can have access to a digital toolkit, which gives you all the messaging around why the ban should be stopped, why the ban is unilateral, why it's immoral, outrageous, why it's going to result in more people dying. There are messages that you can take and put on your social media, as well as graphics that you can use. So please go to our website, Stop the Ban, and Hands Off UNRWA as well, and you will see the different actions you can take to stop this ban. The other key advocacy you can make is to keep calling your representatives. I'm sure many of you are doing that. You called your representatives for months asking for a ceasefire. You called your representatives asking them to restore funds for UNRWA. Hopefully, continue to do that. There is a bill in the House with some very powerful supporters asking the U.S. government to restore funding to UNRWA, and this bill is going forward, and we hope that it will go forward with UNRWA intact in Gaza and the West Bank. I want to make clear that UNRWA doesn't only operate in Gaza and the West Bank, including East Jerusalem, but also serves millions of Palestine refugees in Lebanon, which we know has been subject to an extremely brutal assault, also in Jordan and also in Syria. So UNRWA is really a lifeline for almost 6 million Palestine refugees across the Middle East, not just in Gaza and the West Bank, but But Gaza, of course, is where the funds are needed most, as well as Lebanon these days.
Listeners, make sure you hear very clearly that how catastrophic this may be. That UNRWA right now, because Israel has systematically, blown up virtually every hospital, everything, every building where things happen, whether it's a bakery or a hospital or a mosque, all these places of community, they're gone. So UNRWA is now the they are the majority. They are providing the majority of the help, whether it's food, whether it's shelter, whether it's medicine, whether it's they're doing that. And so, again, removing UNRWA from Gaza, the West Bank, including East Jerusalem, catastrophic, right? And one thing I want to point out that you just said as well is that, when so many of the countries, when the disinformation campaign around the UNRWA employees came out earlier last year, and a lot of the countries stopped funding stopped funding UNRWA, many of those came back. When it was proven to not be true, many of the countries came back. The U.S. and several others did not. And the U.S. was providing $350 million a year to UNRWA, and that stopped and still hasn't come back. Think about how big that number is. And that still hasn't come back. And so UNRWA needs our support, and they need this bill that you just referenced to move forward from the House to the Senate to the President. Like, I don't know how that's going to happen, but I hope it does, because this literally life-saving money from the U.S. needs to begin flowing again to really this incredible organization that is
Yeah,
doing the majority of the work right now.
absolutely. And I want to also say it's not just about saving lives this very minute. That is number one. But also, we have 600,000 students in Gaza, 50,000 in the West Bank. The 600,000 in Gaza have been out of school for now their second year in a row.
Wild.
We talk about being a parent, and imagine your children can't go and learn. And these are traumatized children. This is robbing a generation of young people of their futures, in addition to the trauma they have to bear, having been part of seeing their loved ones being killed in front of their own eyes. It is an impossible weight on these small shoulders. So we need to fund UNRWA so that UNRWA can get back to its role, not just saving lives, but UNRWA was the education provider for half of those 600,000 children until October of 2023. And right now, because every single person in Gaza has been displaced some 10 times, everybody in Gaza now are refugees. And UNRWA now has a mandate for all 600,000 children in Gaza to educate them. And I also want to say something that in these dark moments, Nick, like, I won't lie, I've crumpled and fallen on the ground at a couple of times just in tears, because I've never in my whole life been in a situation where my work can actually save people's lives. You're in jobs and somebody says, is this really life or death? And every time in my own life before this, I would say, you're absolutely right. It is not life or death. These last 5 years, in particular, these last 15 months have been life or death. There's a huge responsibility. And what makes me keep going and get past this is all of our supporters. So I just want to shout out to every supporter in America. We went from 7,000 in early October. We added 138,000 supporters, donors. Since then, we went from about 7 million in revenue at most, average 4 million over the last 10 years, to over $51 million last year.
Wild.
And that's, yeah, we have a great staff, don't get me wrong, but that's not just about our staff. That's about the compassion and the care of the American people. And when the US government stepped aside from its moral duty and, like you said, paused, and perhaps we're waiting to see if this is going to be permanent, the funding to UNRWA to the tune of over $360 million, the American people stepped up. And that 51 million dollars, 56 million total that's gone to Gaza since October, yeah, it doesn't fill the whole gap of the 360 million, but it is a huge, huge effort that has kept thousands, if not tens of thousands of people alive. And the American people became the third largest donor to the Gaza emergency, just behind two countries. So the American people are ahead of every other country in the world in terms of their generosity and compassion. And that's what gives me hope. That's what makes me feel good, feel like we can get through this, because the people know what's going on, even if our governments don't always.
Incredible. Yes. Thank you to the American people. I saw firsthand that on the tour that we went on with our friend Motes on last autumn. The generosity, it just literally, I mean, every day I cried multiple times, whether it was just producing the event or watching people raise their hands and commit huge numbers of huge amounts of money to this work. So really, really grateful. Okay, during this last section of our conversation, you're a busy person and you've got way more to do today besides just talk to me. I want to touch on a couple more things. One being, that's an on purpose deep breath.
I
This,
should take one too.
yeah, this, yesterday I was meeting a friend for lunch, one of my mentors, and as he was walking up was all the Twitter feed, the Instagram feed that the ceasefire deal had been signed. I mean, literally, I couldn't contain myself. And there are still so many unknowns. And we saw that I woke up to different news this morning that Netanyahu is stalling, and it's still got to make it to Sunday when the actual a ceasefire goes into place. And I think in the next 4 days we're going to see more horrific. We've already seen more horrific killing and bombing, and a lot more is going to happen between now and Sunday. And I don't know if it's going to get signed on Sunday now with this news, but for a moment, I got to watch videos of little children just overjoyed that this was happening. And it's really emotional, just fighting for something. And I can't imagine being in their position. This is just me living in Manhattan, stupid, but I like every single hour of every day for the last 15 months. This is all I've lived. I've lost so much work and I've lost so many friends, and all of that's worth it. Who cares about all that? So it's just been a very emotional last 24 hours. How are you processing through this news? What are you hopeful about? What are you not hopeful about? And really, what does this mean? Do you have any thoughts? I know none of this is like, again, nobody knows what the hell's going on, but like, do you have any thoughts about what this even means maybe for the potential ban? Just really interesting
Yeah.
times because no one knows what's going on.
Yeah. Yeah. First and foremost, we're all humans ahead of every other thing we do, our job, and I always tell the staff and that's why I tell the staff you have to take care of your mental and your physical health, number one, because you can't do your job if you're not a whole person. And we bring our whole selves to work. Right? And as a human being, I was like you. I felt joy, and I smiled, and I felt a sense of relief. And that went against every rational part of my body, I'm going to tell you, because every time we'd felt hope, when we thought we thought a ceasefire was imminent, our hopes were dashed. Every time we thought we'd hit the bottom of what experts, Amnesty, Human Rights Watch, Israeli historians are telling us is a genocide, every time we reached the bottom of that, we thought we reached the bottom, a new hell descended. So the rational part of me is skeptical. The emotional part of me took a breath. And my dear colleague Hanny, one of the several staff members, most of our staff members are Palestinian, and like I said, 4 of them have family in Gaza. And I turned to Hanny, and to see Hanny joyful, it was extremely powerful. And like we mentioned it earlier, he's lost so many family members. Lost is such a euphemism. They've been killed unnecessarily. They're innocents. They're civilians. And to think about what this affords the rest of his family, a way out, a way forward, is extremely meaningful. So yeah, I let myself be happy. I know that that there are so many ifs, but I want to be an optimist. I want to hope that this will lead that it will be signed, that the first stage of this will be implemented. It will lead to a second stage, and it will lead to a third stage, and that God willing, it will lead to a just and permanent, solution to the plight of Palestine refugees. At the same time, I'm not naive. I'm watching as Netanyahu has already backed off aspects of the ceasefire. We mentioned 80 Palestinians killed in 24 hours. I I hope this is not a kind of publicity stunt for January 20th in this country, um, I but this is the only way forward is a ceasefire, and let's hope good leads to more good and calm leads to more calm, and that ultimately a just peace is achieved. We gotta hope. We got nothing else. We have to hope. So we are cautiously optimistic, is what I'll say. And what's interesting about UNRWA is that Hanny had Hanny gets news from his all his friends and family on the ground, and as Israel was prepping for this ceasefire announcement, they were actually, Nick, this is maybe hot off the press, like breaking news right here on Let's Give a Damn. The Israel engaged UNRWA bulldozers to bulldoze the area between the north and south so that Palestinians could actually get back to the north. So here's these laws making UNRWA persona non grata, and UNRWA is this and blah blah. Meanwhile, behind the scenes, Israel is engaging UNRWA because, again, they are the infrastructure of
Yep.
humanitarian aid, of civic works, of the school system, of the health system in Gaza. So who bulldozes this land to allow people to return? UNRWA. So I think that is tacit recognition that this rebuilding can't happen without UNRWA, and 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 I hope that is the case in reality. It's not just protecting a name; it's protecting an institution that has meant so much to Palestine refugees, has kept them alive, has kept a potential sovereign state alive, and has educated generation after generation, but also has employed 13,000 staff. And these staff members are the people who've had the expertise to do all these things. So these staff members are individual Palestinians who know what they're doing, and they will be part, God willing, of the most efficient rebuilding that hopefully we'll get to in the coming months.
Let me ask one question from that I got on social media that someone wanted to ask you. And the question was, and I don't know if you'll be able to answer this or how well you'll be able to answer, especially in the time that we have left. This is probably a longer conversation, but how do we undo the damage from Israeli Hasbara? And
Yeah.
there's just so, I mean, just so much.
Yeah.
I mean, part of the work that you all have to do, whether directly or indirectly, is just to fight the misinformation and disinformation. We've talked at length, and we've seen, the bus stop billboards near the UN where it has a picture of a T word, and in the headband is a blue UNRWA headband, and if you anybody try right now to type UNRWA into Google, and the first it'll say sponsored on top, and it'll be a website, and it's a Israeli sponsored website that's just full of disinformation. I mean, just blatant, on purpose, disinformation. And so, how do we, beyond all the stuff, like, do you have any advice for how to fight the mis and disinformation that we're facing each and every day, and whether it's out in our cities here in New York, or in our inboxes?
Yeah. It is a battle. It's a war in of itself, and it's a war that's allowed the killing of 45,000, probably 100,000 people, when more than 100,000, when the real devastation becomes known, of all the people buried under the rubble and all the people who haven't been counted. That disinformation war is what allowed the actual war on people to happen.
Yep.
And being on the inside and knowing the lies that are spewed is debilitating sometimes. And but for all those who are aware of what's possible in propaganda, of how the media distorts things, keep doing the good work you're doing. Go to UNRWA's site. They have a claims and facts section, which tells it like it is. Look at what we're producing as UNRWA USA. Question authority. Question popular media, and listen. One of the things I always reflect on, Nick, is like how many people, even people I know, have told me things that are outright not true. It's not their fault. They hear it in the media. But sometimes people argue with you. And what's fascinating to me is I'll say, "Oh, so you've been to the Middle East, or you've been to Palestine?" No. "Oh, you've been to Israel?" No. You visited an Arab country ever? No. You know Muslims? No. And I say, "Well, I've been to Israel. I've been to Palestine. I have lived across the Middle East. I speak Arabic. My husband's Muslim, so I take it from me that I'm speaking from some experience and some knowledge."
Yeah.
And so I want to tell every person out there who is a propagandist, and I know not many of them are listening to your show,
Yeah,
thankfully,
probably
but
not.
for for those who might be, for Oppo research, I am a Jewish American, a proud Jewish American who went to Gaza, who met with every UNRWA staff member, who has worked hand in hand with UNRWA for 5 years. I have never, never, not once seen what the allegations are. Never has anyone said anything to me about my Jewishness. And so we just got to keep fighting. And if there are those amongst your wonderful audience who want to help us fight the disinformation against us, that is a campaign we'll be engaged in, because it's dangerous. It's already, that disinformation, like I said, probably 100,000 deaths have resulted from it in Gaza. 269 UNRWA staff members have been killed. I worry about our own staff. It is deeply personal, and all I can do is state the truth. And luckily, we're on the side of the angels. So
Amen.
come to the side of the angels with us,
Coming to the
and
side of
we'll
the
all do good work
angels.
together.
For those listening, all the links that were referenced and more will be in the show notes. Please check those out for the digital advocacy toolkit that Mara referenced. There'll also be a link that I'll post about writing your reps. It's very easy. You click on the link, fill in your info, and UNRWA USA sends something on your behalf to your reps. And also, not just the ban, but also talk to your reps about HR 9495, the nonprofit killer bill, which will, in this next administration, if it passes, it would give the Treasury Secretary, and by extension, the President of the United States, unilateral power to designate any nonprofit they wish. They don't have to have proof. They don't have to have anything. If they don't like you, they can designate you a terrorist organization and strip you of your 501c3 tax status and strip you of your power to raise money and distribute it and do these programs out in the world. And I would guess in this next administration, UNRWA USA would be a target there. So also talk to your senators, because it's in the Senate right now. It's being held in the Senate, about 9495, because we definitely don't want that to pass. So all these links will be in the show notes. You can also just go to UNRWA USA's social media, their website. Check it out. Get involved. Follow Mara. Follow Hanny. Follow Layla. Follow UNRWA USA. Follow Motaz. You'll be in good company there. Mara, thank you so much for your work. I hope we can do this again in a few months, and that it'll be under much different circumstances. There'll be a ceasefire in place, and UNRWA will still be working in Gaza, the West Bank, East Jerusalem, and hope we can have a more hopeful and, hey, we've got a plan sort of a conversation next time. And I look forward to continuing to work with you this year at UNRWA USA. Thank you
Great.
so much for joining today.
Thank you, Nick. Thanks for all the work you do, and thanks for your amazing audience as well.